I wanted more time with my daughter Emerson on Father's Day. We spent 3 hours together. We had a great time. I had a great time. It was really fun. And once the whole outing ended, I was thinking we'd go and do something else. I wanted to go to a movie or hang out by the pool, do something different. And I could feel this defensiveness welling up in me. And I even could sense myself being tempted to say something that would put pressure or guilt on her to spend more time with me. I didn't, luckily, because I recognized it, but it took me down for a little bit. I wasn't being grateful for the time that I got. I wasn't recognizing her as an 18-year-old who wanted to go hang out with her friends. And that's the thing about being defensive. We make things worse. We add to drama. If you interact with people at work or at home who get defensive often, it adds stress to the interactions. We end up being focused on things that aren't important because we have to actually deal with the defensiveness. We don't feel the freedom to share ideas. It creates some damage. We don't address core issues. This is where the term walking on eggshells comes from, because you feel people can react. Trust is impacted. We waste time. Today we're going to talk about this, how to stop getting defensive. Here's how, all right? So this is the Decide Your Legacy podcast. Welcome. Today's episode, you're going to learn 3 ways that you can work on not being defensive. I'm sure you can think of people at work and home who can trigger you, and you may even have to brace yourself. Even the word defensive, well, I have to protect myself from what? From what? So if you learn to let that down and actually see today, you're going to see how impactful that is and how much stress you can relieve from your life when you have a different approach, a non-defensive approach. In these difficult interactions that you may have at work and at home and with your family and friends and different people in the community, you're going to feel as if you can take that guard down and have tools to do so, and tools you can implement today to start practicing. You can learn this through steps, and it will take practice. So I faced a fear recently, and I share a fear that I faced in most episodes, because nothing is more important to your mental health than facing your fears, and nothing is more damaging than playing it safe. We're in the business of courage here, and the fear that I actually faced was I have started to, when we at Decide Your Legacy are potentially going to work with a business or an individual one-on-one client, to give them some steps that they have to actually take before we're going to give them a proposal. So we need to see if they're going to take action, because action is where change happens. And if they can't do that, then we really can't help. It isn't the right time. It doesn't mean it won't be in a month or 2 months, but that's been scary for me because I like to help everybody. I'm a people pleaser, and I can struggle with that. And it's my own mindset perspective, but it's scary. What's something scary that you have done over the last week? I'd challenge you to put some time into thinking about that, because you probably have done something, and if you have not, plan it into the rest of your day today. I'm your host, Adam Gragg. I'm a legacy coach. I'm a corporate coach. I founded Decide Your Legacy in 2012, and our purpose is to help organizations and people live with courage. Rise above, live with courage. That's it. So I often struggle with getting defensive, and actually people who can get defensive. I brace myself for interactions that I know could and I will receive some pushback. That doesn't mean I shouldn't say what I want to say to help them. It's not about me, but it doesn't mean it's easy either. Here's what I do to go into interactions, and I've had a number of them over the last week, to go into interactions prepared for a potential defensive response. It's painful to deal with this. I believe that a lot of people get defensive because they're afraid of being looked at as incompetent. They're afraid of somebody taking advantage of them. So if I don't tell them the truth about this situation, they're going to use that against me. They're going to see me as not doing my job. They're going to judge me. I'm not going to have opportunities. When the opposite is true, your defensiveness actually makes the problem worse. And collusion is a word I want you to grasp. Collusion, the definition, and I really like this because it motivates me to not be defensive, this is the definition: a secret or illegal cooperation or conspiracy in order to cheat or deceive others. Wow. So when we're engaging in defensiveness, and there's a big difference between defensiveness and just making a point, pointing out facts, and it's the heart. It's the heart. And that's something I'm going to challenge you to consider. Where's my heart? Why am I doing this? What is my objective? Is it guarded or is it open? That's going to give you some indication. But we collude. We actually engage in deceptive activity when we're getting defensive. Do you want to do that? That's the problem. So here are 3 steps that you can take to prepare and to go into these interactions when you may have a tendency, to get defensive. Okay, the first one is to remember it's not about you. If you can grasp and make that kind of shift to say, it's really not about me, their behavior is a reflection of them and what's going on inside of them. Their behavior has potentially nothing to do with what we're talking about here. It can go and be stemming from way back in their life. And I may perceive it as it being about me, but it's not about me. That helps you to step back and see the big picture and realize that everything you say is probably not going to sink in, even if you say it in this situation. And defensiveness, to recognize it comes in many different forms. You may be thinking about somebody who's loud and obnoxious, and they just have to get the last word in. That is one form of defensiveness. But defensiveness also can be from avoidance, passive-aggressive behavior. They're defending through not addressing anything at all. It can come in the form of distraction. I'm defensive in the form of not actually being willing to talk about the core issues at hand. You're bringing up other issues frequently rather than facing the one main one. And a key indicator of somebody being defensive is this flavor of avoidance. I'm going to avoid through excuses, through negativity, through passivity. I'm going to avoid. When you recognize that it's not about you, then it's not an attack. It's not personal. It's something you can actually feel some empathy for. And you can see them as a person who is struggling rather than somebody who is trying to bring you down. Because your mindset is like, they've gone through a lot of stuff. They had a bad day. They don't feel great about themselves. They don't feel like they contribute. There's something else in that situation. This not about me attitude makes you check your own perspective about why you may be feeling defensive. What is it about you that is occurring in this situation, and what has happened in your life that leads you to interact with this defensive person in a way where you have to guard yourself? That is going to give you some clues. Maybe you want to be a person who is always looked at as smart, or the person who has the answers, or the person who has the ability to contribute in every situation. I mean, it's a humbling thing to say, I don't know. I don't have the answer, but I'll research it and I'll find out. When it's not about you, you're willing to do that. That's where the stress leaves, because you have more time and opportunities. It doesn't have to be fixed in this specific moment. You can listen and understand. When you're defensive, you're formulating your response even before you're actually listening. That's one of the costs of being defensive. You don't actually understand. You stay in a guarded place. You aren't even able to build relationships because of that wall between you and somebody else, because you're not willing to put it down. Their defensiveness does not mean that you have to be defensive as well. In fact, the likelihood of them not interacting in that way is influenced greatly in a direct fashion if you can stay calm and you can remember that it's not about you. So, real client conversation that I had recently, a lady who can get defensive with her husband. And there are certain things that her husband will say that trigger this defensiveness. And I asked her, well, what are those things? And as we talked about it, and it wasn't really the easiest conversation, they were things related to managing time, productivity, and I don't think this husband was being a control freak or anything like that. Her her answer, as we discussed it, was he says things that are actually true. He points out things in my life. He shines light on it in a way, and she described it as in a compassionate, caring way. But I get defensive because I don't like the fact that I spend time on these specific activities. They weren't necessarily time wasters, but they were things that weren't as productive and encouraging in her life. They weren't helping her at the same level that other activities help. And that was insightful. That was stepping back and seeing that her defensiveness was rooted in her not wanting to change these parts of her life where she isn't using her time wisely. Her words, not her words. So, and she even said, he points out the ways that I can be selfish. Whether or not she's being super selfish, I don't know. I don't have the details. But our defensiveness, their defensiveness can easily be related to things that they don't want revealed that are true. And if you remember that it's not about you, you can have empathy for it being hard to shine light on areas that are dark. The darkness can't hide anymore. It can get into more darkness, and that's sometimes what happens, but it can't hide for that moment in the darkness. So the second thing to focus on here, one is to remember it's not about you. I'm going into this interaction. It's not about me. It's not about me. And the second thing is you can get curious. And you've heard me say this. All of my all the Decide Your Legacy clients, they know this. Be curious, be curious. So by curiosity, you're taking the focus off of you and you're putting it towards some kind of productive interaction where you're getting to know somebody better. You're understanding the situation better. There's loads and loads and loads of opportunities to learn about somebody else. When you see somebody, even when they're difficult, as having value and counting the same as you, and somebody you can learn about and get to know and understand, then it's going to lead you to want to interact in a way that's productive, where it's moving the needle and where it's not destructive. And which, by the way, productive meetings for businesses, and I get this all the time. In fact, I'm going to do a podcast in the next few on how to have a great meeting, something that I hear a lot. But as I've talked about this today, it reminded me that meetings where people get defensive, they don't move the needle on solving a problem. They just use that as a distraction to not actually address the core issue. That defensiveness guards them from actually making progress, and it makes meetings suck. And that's why people don't like meetings, because they don't make progress. I see meetings that companies have where they're excited to go. I had one last night with a company leadership team. They're excited to engage because they're making progress. And the structure and the leadership and ownership of how we can get defensive adds to that progress. It makes that environment fun. And who shouldn't have fun at work? I know Troy likes to have fun. We like to have fun. Okay, fun is good. So another client, real situation, had talking about some difficult interactions at work. He was able to identify that his defensiveness often comes from not knowing the answers and wanting to appear as if he does know the answers. So his heart isn't in the right place. His motive isn't in the right place. He's new in his position. He's very competent. He's very smart. He's around other very competent, smart people. So a bunch of architects and newer in that kind of role. And it comes out as defensiveness. So he's bracing when asked questions to give a response that makes him look competent. And it leads him into interactions where there's not an exchange of information, because those questions oftentimes are just curious questions and people are trying to get to know him and understand, but that defensive response kills the progress. And it's not what we actually want. We stay guarded. We don't grow. We let our guard down. We're open. Out of hope, we grow. Hope versus fear. Big deal. So if you want to work on this, I'll tell you, when you go into interactions potentially where you know you might get defensive, it's really essential to recognize how your own personal, I don't necessarily like the phrase self-care, but your own personal let's just say self-care is impacting it. So if you didn't get enough sleep, if you're not eating healthy, if you're not getting exercise, and also if you're not going into those interactions prepared. So know what you're dealing with so you don't give your power away. And that's exactly what you do when you get sucked into someone else's defensiveness. You're giving all the power and productivity to somebody else. In fact, it's not productive, but you're giving anything good that could have come out of that interaction is being thrown away, because now you're just spinning in collusion, making it worse, and you're going on a tangent, which isn't leading you towards progress, which discourages everybody, including yourself. Don't want to do that. So what I like to do is have some questions prepared in advance if things go south. So what you can do is, even somebody's defensive and and you can ask the question, can you tell me more? You're getting curious. So they have to give you specific examples potentially, or even ask that question, can you give me specific examples? I can tell this is bothering you. I would really like to learn more. I'm curious. Can you give me an example? Or you can ask similar questions in a defensive manner, which happens, and that's not what I'm talking about here, crossing your arms and shaking your head and saying, can you tell me more? Opening your arms up. That's not a open posture. So it has to be a genuine, curious question right there. Has to be, or else it's going to collude, and you don't want to collude. If you go in knowing that if things go really south in that interaction, and I know you're probably caught off guard with some of these defensive interactions, but you can always remember that other people in the situation, you can ask them questions. And that can take people out of that emotional place into their prefrontal cortex where they have to think. And that's what you want, because defensiveness comes out of the part of the brain that's emotion-centered called the amygdala, and thinking doesn't come from that same space. You can see this in interaction. So people start to think and they start to let their guard down. So third action to take, keep in mind when going into potentially difficult conversations is your time horizon, okay? So what I mean by this is time is a big deal. It's the way we orient ourselves to life. I had a client recently that interacted with me in a way where it seemed like he had to make every decision that day. Everything was urgent and important. And just discussing things and his age and realizing in the conversation that he wants to be in this career that he's in for the next 30 years potentially. Well, he's got lots of time to make mistakes and try new things and learn how to delegate. It doesn't have to happen today. Now, when people bring up money, a lot of times there's urgency tied to that. Even that, if you think, I have lots of time to make money and lose money, but get better at making money, that's expanding your time horizon, and it's going to decrease your anxiety going into potential difficult interactions. Because if they get defensive, and if you get defensive and you collude, well, you're going to have opportunities to learn. I don't want you to do that, but you're going to have opportunities to learn from that. If you are in an interaction and you don't feel like it goes anywhere because of their defensiveness, well, you have a longer term time horizon. That's okay. And you can still get a lot out of this interaction if you handle it, if you do your part, if you do yours, so you can practice. That gives you the freedom to practice. You have lots and lots of time and lots of chances. 7 up right there. So my buddy Brent, who is a good friend and he's a therapist, and I refer clients to him because that's not our world. It was my world in the past. But he, as I was talking to him, can talk about and be a little bit hard on himself. I should have done this differently with this client. I wish I would have known that before. Or when am I going to learn how to engage in a way where it helps the client, better, like other people help clients? I mean, that's not the verbatim in our conversation, but I asked him though, because he's a little older than me. I said, do you want to be doing this in 20 years? And his answer was quickly, yeah, if I can get past, some of this junk right now, is the gist of what he said. And, well, how good do you think you'll be in 20 years? And he said, well, I'll probably be better than I am now. And then we talked about, well, if you're going to be doing this 20 years and you're going to keep getting better at it, then what are the actions you should focus on now over the next 90 days that are going to help you to keep getting better? And he had certain tasks and actions that he could engage. And one was working on his patience with himself. And another was related to some training and application of that training. But he had some ideas, but I could see in him, at least my perception was, it relieved a lot of the tension from him going into these interactions, which you can deal with defensiveness as a clinician in other people. I mean, that is that resistance to change. It's the big fear people have. It's a big fear and loss of connection. And you go into a therapeutic interaction. I mean, it's like they can get defensive. So you got time, you got chances, which is a great, encouraging, exciting thing. And if you go in that way, like for me, I made a shift about 2 years ago, I would say a year and a half ago. And the shift was that because there were times in my life where I just wanted to make money fast in my career. I wanted a home run. And I do projects and sell courses and have tried new things, and I want it to work at a high level right away. I have this urgency addiction. But I remember reading a book and having some conversations with some other business leaders, and it started to sink in that I'm going to be doing this for a long time, and I'm going to make mistakes, and it's okay. I like to think of myself doing this for at least 27 more years, running Decide Your Legacy, doing coaching, and doing more and more what is fascinating and motivating to me most, which is coaching and which is creating content, and there's some things that are just irritating for me, and learn how to delegate that. But that time horizon is like, I can go into interactions and I can experiment and I can give myself some grace if it doesn't go well. Total shift for me. I mean, when I keep that mindset in place. So you want to do that as you go into interactions. I mean, give yourself some grace as you go in and deal with other people's defensiveness. So I want to share a story that this is something that happened. This happened a couple months ago. And I had a meeting with a number of business owners. So they all own a specific business. And one of the owners was very skeptical about engaging corporate development, our services. And I knew that. I had never met him. I had met two of the owners. I had not met two of the owners. But I knew the guy had been in this job for over 30 years. He had been a big part of the success of the company. There had been a number of different changes. The organization wants to grow. A lot of things that were good and positive, but this level of defensiveness, I knew it was going to be something I was facing that day. And I'll tell you what, I mean, for a long period of time, I was dreading having that interaction. I was like, it's not going to go well. My inner roommate is, he's not going to like me. One of those things. They're not going to want to work with me. But do I want to work with them? I don't even want to have this meeting. You should cancel the meeting. It's not going to be useful. Anyway, I knew that was fear. I knew that wasn't healthy. When I could make the shift to say, I want to help these people, and if I can, let's see if we can move forward. But we got to have this interaction to even see if it's possible for me to help this company, for Decide Your Legacy to help them. And so sure enough, and this has happened to me many times. It's not like I haven't experienced this before, but I knew when I was going in that he was going to be defensive, and he questioned my credibility. So it was more like, who have you helped? What's your education? Why are you qualified to help us? You're not in our industry, which I'm not in that industry. I'm not in any of the industries of the companies that we actually work for. So that's fine. I mean, he knew the answer to these things, but going into that interaction, it ended up being a very good interaction. So very defensive. And what I did is I said, hey, can you tell me more? I'd like to know more. What is the concern that you have? And this has happened numerous times, but his response to that was to not answer that question and to let the other people in the meeting ask their questions. And he interacted at a higher level after that, because I didn't collude and say, well, I've helped all these companies and I've got this education or whatever. That stuff didn't matter to him. And I'm not big on that kind of stuff either, as far as showing people's credibility. I'm big on results. So this company has gotten this result. This person has gotten this result. Yes. And I believe training is valuable and experience is valuable. Don't get me wrong there. To him, to build trust, I asked a question. I got him to think. He didn't answer the question. And during the rest of the interaction, there were good times where he was engaged and there were times where he wasn't. I left that meeting and I believe all four, although this individual probably I don't believe would have admitted it at the end of the conversation. He will admit it now, but it was an interaction where we were energized. I was energized. I could tell they were energized because there was some action that could be taken based on that conversation. Defensive person, difficult interaction, but a really positive and productive one. So if you, just to summarize, you're going to go into interactions, you're going to have to face it, you're going to have situations. So you remember 3 things. This is your training. This is what you practice, what you leave with. It's not about you. It's not about you. It's about them. It's about them. It's about the issue at hand. It's about something bigger and better and greater. Not that you're not great. I know you're great. You can get curious and tap into that curiosity and expand your time horizon, man. Cut yourself some slack. Is it really going to be the end of your life if you deal with a defensive person? It's going to help you to be calm because you don't have to defend because you have an expanded time horizon. So check out Shatterproof Yourself Light. Follow me and check out this content. It's free. You can download it on the app. You can go through the content on your browser, on your computer. And one of the sections is on channeling hope rather than fear, because defensiveness creates fear. It is fear. It is fear externalized right there. Watch the hope versus fear cycle in the app, in that course. Check it out. And then we have the full version of Shatterproof Yourself, 7 Small Steps to a Giant Leap in Your Mental Health. Check that out. If you like Shatterproof Light, check that out as well. Nothing will make my day better. That's not good grammar, but nothing will make me happier than knowing you took action on something based on this content today. And I would encourage you to do something to take action by the end of the day, because that will make it stick. Nothing's more important than action. Insight is less valuable. You're gaining insight today. Apply something you learned. To decide means to eliminate other options. Your legacy is the impact your life has on other people. There's no positive change until you decide to change. I want to close the way I always do. Live the life today that you want to be remembered for 10 years after you're gone. You decide your legacy, nobody else. I appreciate you greatly, and I'll see you next time.